What's up, Brew Crew? Opie here. Welcome back to my Brew City Garden. So it's mid-spring, mid to early spring, and I'm ready to plant some onions. You might be thinking the same thing too. But for the first-time gardener, sometimes onions can be a little bit confusing. See, you get to choose from seeds or sprouts or even onion sets. So which do you use and what's the difference? You know, as a first-time gardener, when it came to growing onions, I have to admit I was a little bit confused, and I think there's good reason for that. Because there's the choice between onion seeds or onion sprouts that you can get from your nursery, and then there's onion sets. And at first, it wasn't terribly obvious to me for a couple years. So I just went ahead and grabbed onion sets, which were kind of the easiest to find at, say, a big box store, or even some grocery stores will have onion sets available. So first off, what exactly is an onion set? Well, let's think about the life cycle of an onion to start with. So onions are biennials, which means they take 2 years from seed to flower. So from seed to seed, it takes 2 years. In the first year, if you plant the seeds, they'll grow and they'll establish a bulb. And then when winter comes, they'll die back and they'll overwinter. And then the next year, they'll grow back again, and then they'll grow a flower stalk and go to flower and then go to seed from there. So what onion sets are essentially is these were planted from seed last fall, and they were allowed to get just big enough to make these small onion sets, these small onion bulbs, and then they were basically put into dormancy to mimic winter. And these are just really made to be very convenient to plant in the spring. You just toss them in the ground, and typically they do make a fairly nice bulb. There's one caveat to these onion sets, though, is there's a really good chance that these will go to flower, because technically these are a second year onion. Now, when onions go to flower, it's not a terrible thing, but the problem with onions that go to flower is they don't store well. So you really have to use them pretty much immediately when you harvest them. Now, onion sets are also great for if you just want green onions or onion tops. You can plant these really close together and just harvest the onion tops, and onion sets work great for that. But if you're looking for long storing bulbs, onion sets probably not the way you want to go. So besides onion sets, you got your onion seeds or your onion sprouts. And really the difference between these is how much time do you have. So if you want to plant onions with seed, you really need to start these super early. Here in Zone 5B, if I want to use onion seeds, I need to sow these typically by the 2nd or 3rd week of February. Even earlier is better. I could get away with sowing these at the 2nd week of January. Onions take a very long time to get going. And if you want sprouts ready to go for spring, you really need to get these in between the 2nd week of January and the 2nd week of February. So if you want to use onion seeds, you're not going to be able to do it at this point in the spring unless all you want are onion greens, which leads me to the onion sprouts. So these are the seeds that I planted in mid-February, and you can see that after even a few months, they're still very small. But these are actually good to go. These are ready to put in the garden, and as the spring through summer, these will really start to, they'll grow up nice and big, get some nice bulbs off of these. Now, I prefer to start with seed in wintertime and plant out onion starts in the spring. These are pretty much guaranteed to bulb up, and you will not have any issues with them flowering. So these will make very nice long storing onions. All right, guys, with all that being said, it's time for me to get my onions out. We're finally getting a nice day. This is our first day without rain in a week. So it's really time to get these out. It's still a little bit brisk out here, but onions don't mind. Their onions are very cold hardy. And really, as soon as you see your garlic come up in the spring, maybe a week or two after that, you can really put your onions out and they should be fine. Of course, you want to pay attention to the weather in your area. Everywhere's a little bit different. So just use your common sense, but onions are really cold hardy, so you shouldn't have too many problems once you get them out in the garden. All right, let's go get this garden bed set up and get our onions planted in the Brew City Garden for the 2019 season. All right, guys, let's go. All right, so the first thing we need to do is decide where we want to plant our onions. Now, you can grow onions in a straw bale garden. However, I find that they just do better in a soil environment. So yes, they will grow in the straw bale gardens, but I get better performance out of soil. So that's what we're going to use. Now, whether you put these directly in the ground or use a raised bed, that's going to be completely up to you. What I'm using is a kiddie pool. You know what? These things work great as raised bed gardens and as wicking gardens. And we're going to do both this year at the Brew City Garden channel. Now, for the last couple years, I have used this as a wicking bed or a wicking garden. However, this particular kiddie pool is a couple years old now. It's weathered and it's sprung a leak. So what I need to do is just drill some holes in the bottom of this. Even though it's sprung a leak, I just want to make sure that any rain that gets in here can flow through and drain out of this pool with no problems. So we're just going to add a few holes. No big deal. Just got a small drill bit here. We'll just go all around here. All right, that should work. I mean, it's nothing particular. I just punched several holes in here, and that'll work just fine. So now what we need to do is get our soil in here. And of course, you can use any soil or soilless mix that you choose. I am going to use my compost, and I will amend that with a little bit of perlite just to make sure it's free draining. All right, so I got my garden bed planter put together. The soil here is, well, it's compost. It's the compost that I get from the municipal yard. I just added perlite to it, and it's approximately 4 to 6 inches deep across the whole kiddie pool or planter bed. You know, with onions, you don't want to go any less than 4 inches deep, but of course, the deeper you go, the better. It's fine. What I'm going to plant is I'm going to plant my seedlings or my starts, and I'm going to plant some sets. You know, I always end up starting way more than what I can actually put out in the garden, but that's okay. I got a couple different varieties here. So we're gonna mix them up, and if I find little odds and ends places across the Brew City Garden, I'll stick an onion here and there. So it's okay there, no worries. When I plant my onion seeds in winter, I sow them very thick. And you can see I just used an old yogurt container here and really just kind of dump the seeds in there and let them come up as they may. And you can get away with doing that with onions because their root system is very strong. It's very wiry, very hardy, and you can literally just pull these things apart and they really don't mind at all. They come apart pretty easy. Be a little bit forceful with them and they'll be fine. You can see they just come right apart just fine, no problems there. So since I've got so many, I will weed out the small, weak looking starts, and we'll just plant the larger, healthier looking starts. So let's go ahead and get all these pulled apart and ready to go. This is the Ailsa Craig onions, which are fairly highly sought after because they make a very large onion, a very nice tasting onion. They can be used as contest onions. So who knows, maybe some of these will end up at the state fair this year. You see how easily these just come apart, no problem whatsoever. All right, so those will be ready to plant. So when it comes to planting these onion seedlings, or onion starts, really you don't plant these deep whatsoever. You just want to get them just into the soil, and you still want to be able to see just a little bit of the white sticking up out of the soil. So we just stick that in there. Just like that, I can still see the white, and the roots are just buried under the soil. And that's the way onions grow. If you plant these too deep, your bulb development will suffer. I'm also going to go ahead and throw some onion sets in here. Unfortunately, my onion starts, I didn't get any red onion starts. Well, I started them, but I didn't follow my own advice. With onion seeds, you can't store onion seeds for more than a year or 2 years tops. After that, the germination rate declines rapidly. I had a couple packs of seeds of red onions that were 2 years old. I planted them over winter, and of course the germination rate on them was terrible. I got about 6 little starts or seedlings. So I went ahead and picked up the red onion sets. So we'll just grow some onion sets. Now I'm going to put these in the center of the bed here, just because there's a good chance that some of these will go to flower, and those stalks will get much taller. So I just want those to be in the middle for aesthetics, and just for sun coverage as well, so that they don't block out too much light from the other onions. But with onion sets, these are pretty self-explanatory. That one's dried up. It's probably no good. So the pointy end is always going to go up, and if you turn it over, you can see the rooted end. It'll have kind of a little dirty look to it, but you could tell there was roots there, or there will be roots there. Of course, that's the end that goes down. With onion sets, you can plant these a little bit deeper, just so that the tops are sticking out just like that. And the bulb development will be just fine with these, since these have already started developing last fall. Now, if you plan on using onion sets just to get the green onion tops, you can literally plant these right next to each other, literally touching each other, in a fashion something like that. If you want bulb development, you want to plant these about 3 inches apart. So you don't want these guys too close to each other. That way they can bulb up. Give them a little bit of room to breathe. 3 to 4 inches will be just fine, and you'll get some very nice bulb development out of these. I'm going to go ahead and plant up the rest of these onion seeds and onion sets, and we should have enough onions to get us through our season. Like I said, I'll plant some more throughout the garden here and there, and I will put some onion sets in the straw bales just to see how those do, because that's something I have not tried yet. So that might be a good fit for the onion sets. All right, so we got our onion bed completely planted out. I've got the Elsa Craig and even some Kelsey onions up front. I put the onion sets in the center because of the potential for those to go to flower and go to seed. And you know what? I've got a ton of starts left over. And I got a ton of onion sets left over as well. So I'm going to have to get creative and find some other places to put these across the Brew City Garden. But you know what? I don't see that as a problem. I'll also see if Jose the neighbor wants some, and anybody else here in the neighborhood that wants to grow some onions. You know, I've got a bad habit of starting way more than what I need, but it's always a nice thing to get with the neighbors and see if you can help them out. So this kiddie pool planting bed gets pretty much full sun. The sun comes up in the east and comes straight overhead and sets in the west. So for the majority of the day, this will get plenty of sun. There's really not much shade here, so these onions should do very well. Of course, we're going to keep up with that throughout the season, so make sure you keep up with the Brew City Garden so you can see how the onions do this year. All right, guys. Hey, thanks again for joining me today here at the Brew City Garden. And if you're new to the world of onions, I really hope this video helped you out a little bit. And if it did, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me. That's going to help me out a ton. Hey, if you got any questions at all, just leave them in the comments below, and I will make certain that I get to them and answer them the best that I can. All right, make sure you guys stick around because there's so much more to come here at the Brew City Gardener channel. And until next time, you guys have an awesome day. We'll see you.